Hello everyone, I'm Paulyn Louise, our son Pedro, a student in the University of the Philippines Open University under the program of Bachelor of Arts in Multimedia Studies. And to authenticate my identity, here is my Emirates ID. Our guest for today is a fellow classmate in the English for the Profession course. Miss Adami, kindly introduce yourself and acknowledge that this is your first time seeing my presentation. Miss Adami?
Hello, my name is Kristelle Joyce Adami. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
My name is Kristelle Joyce Adami, and I am a student also of English 157. And I acknowledge that this is my first time seeing the presentation.
Thank you very much. So we are here today because I am tasked to create a presentation for my English for the Profession course. The topic that I have chosen centers on giving advice in creating visual aids for an oral presentation. The participant is then expected to give a feedback on my performance afterwards. So let's get started. Tip number 1, write your speech. The first thing that you must do is to write down what you will say in the presentation. This way, you can organize the information that you will deliver to your audience. Next, our tip number 2 is to rehearse with a timer. Set a timer and start reading out loud your script the way that you will do in an actual performance. If the timing is within the allotted time that was instructed to you by the organizers or your boss, then you can now start planning for your visual aids. Otherwise, you should revise it. This way, your efforts in rehearsing and creating all those visual aids won't go to waste. Then, our tip number 3 is to analyze what visual aids should you use. First, separate your script into blocks and analyze what types of visual aids should you use to enhance the ideas that you will present for those parts. The standard types of visual aids are graphs, diagrams, pictures, and lists. Whatever you choose, be sure to also write it down. In a Word document, you could write your choices through a comment form like this. This way, it will be easier for you to see what you will need in those sections. You can also write down the keywords that you will be using in searching for appropriate images. The tip number 4 is to plan the design theme of your presentation. But make sure that it will be appropriate for your target audience. And at the same time, it is still related to the topic. With this, you can plan the color scheme that you will be using to make the overall look of your slide consistent. You can use this website named Colors to generate a color palette that you can experiment with. But be sure that the colors that you will be using will not be more than 4. Otherwise, it will be too distracted to view. The tip number 5 is to keep your slide content at minimum. Remember, you are the centerpiece of this presentation. Your slide is just there as a support to give a better visualization of the information that you're trying to relay. Therefore, you don't need to put too many things in the slide so they can focus more on what you're saying. Limit the visual aids with only the concept, dataset, or the point you are trying to make. Then, our tip number 6 is to avoid being text-heavy. As much as possible, you should only display keywords, phrases, or short sentences. And avoid cluttering a single slide with too many texts. because text-heavy is more appropriate as a printed material for in-depth reading, rather than as a visual aid for an oral presentation. Next, our tip number 7 is to make your text easy to read. It is advisable to use sans serif due to its readability even at a certain distance. It is important to keep in mind that not everyone in your audience has a good vision. So you should also avoid using font size that are too small, nor should you make them all caps as it would appear like your text is screaming. Though you can still use all caps if you're displaying only one word for the purpose of emphasizing it. For the font color, it should be contrasting to the background. You can use a color contrast analyzer program like this to test its readability over your chosen background color. By the way, this program is downloadable for free in the TPGI website. Speaking of background, our tip number 8 is to avoid using bright colors as this can be straining to the eyes. Instead, I recommend using desaturated colors aside from black or white. And lastly, our tip number 9 is to use a consistent transition effect, but also keep it simple so your audience won't be distracted to it. To sum it up, remember to write your speech, rehearse with a timer, analyze what visual aids should you use, plan a design theme of your presentation, keep your slide content at minimal, avoid being text heavy, make your text easy to read, avoid using bright colors as a background, and lastly, use a consistent transition effect. Thank you so much for listening. This is the end of my presentation. So, Miss Adami, what are your thoughts in my performance? What do you think should I further improve to effectively convey an information?
I think I like the way you present, especially the visuals that you use. It's very simple and it reflects the contents of what you're talking about. So it's like an example of what you're saying, how you can create the visual aids. And I also like that you speak at the right pace. It's not too fast, not too slow too. And what you can improve, um, actually, I don't have any any suggestions on how you can improve that because it's actually my type of presentation. It's very simple and doesn't have it's not complicating the subject. So I think I don't have any suggestion how you can make that better. I also another thing is I like how you introduced the tools that you use like the coolers and um, color contrast analyzer because those are if I'm an audience listening to your presentation those are the things that I will take away from the presentation.
Thank you very much.